Namaste, friends. Welcome to the next episode of the series, The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita. Today we are moving on to chapter 3. We have been on chapter 2 for quite a few weeks now. And from starting today, I'm going to move on to the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the chapter on Karma Yoga. The verse that I've picked for today is the 8th verse of chapter 3. So as usual, I'll first read the verse, share the translation, and then a brief commentary on that verse. So this is how the verse goes. Niyatam kuru karma tvam, karma jyayo hya karmanaha, shariraya trapi chate na, prasiddhayed akarmanaha. And now I'll read the literal translation of this verse, as written by Swami Kriyananda. Perform those actions which your duty dictates, for action is better than inaction. Without action, indeed, even the act of maintaining life in this body would not be possible. So, in the second chapter, we looked at a number of different concepts that Krishna was going through. That chapter is called Krishna's Consolation. He addresses a lot of things that are troubling Arjuna, and also he comforts him and he sets the stage for the rest of the Gita. That's how I see the second chapter. The third chapter, we are actually going to focus on Karma Yoga, the way of attaining union, the way of spiritual liberation through the path of acting in this world. And Krishna gets very specific. This chapter is one of those aspects of the Gita, one of those parts of the Bhagavad Gita which make this wisdom extremely practical and applicable in our own life. And every single verse in this chapter, just like the second chapter also, is filled with a lot of deep spiritual teachings. And also some of them are rather subtle. That's why this chapter particularly, I think, deserves a lot of discussion and explanation, because there are some teachings in this chapter that are very individual and subjective that each one of us should meditate on in our own lives and see how they're applicable for us. Krishna in this chapter, it actually starts with Arjuna asking Krishna. Every chapter is Krishna's response to something that Arjuna is asking, which in essence is a response to one of those questions on the spiritual path that we all have, that every seeker encounters on their own journey. And Arjuna asks Krishna, with all this explanation that you're providing to me, you're giving me this deep understanding of spirituality and how to live in this world. It seems to me that you're saying this understanding is really important. And if it is so, why are you asking me to act? Isn't understanding better than action itself? And to that question, Krishna is going to answer. It's a rhetorical question, for all of us, because we know we are in the third chapter, which is a chapter on Karma Yoga. So Krishna's answer is, action is more important than mere understanding. But he explains why, and he talks specifically to Arjuna and to the devotee in each one of us on how we understand action, how we apply it in our own lives, and how the subtlety of how we act in this world holds the key to our own liberation. Krishna starts his response to Arjuna's question by saying there are two paths of reaching God in this world. One is through mere wisdom and understanding, and the other is action. And in this particular verse, in the 8th verse, he says, action is superior. And you wonder, superior to what? He's comparing it constantly with mere understanding, mere spiritual philosophy. And he's saying acting in this world is superior. And first, he starts by saying it's not even an option. It's not even an option for you to not act and to consider anything else, because this is not a choice that you're making. Every one of us, every being in this universe is impelled from inside. It is being driven by the three gunas to act in this world. There are all these energies that we bring into this world, and those energies have to express themselves. It is the karma that we are holding as energy in our own bodies and our astral bodies more specifically. And that energy has to ultimately express in this world, which is the reason why we in fact chose to incarnate in a human body. You can think of it as winding a spring. If you have used one of those clocks where you have to really wind a knob or something like that, and then it'll unwind and gradually show you the time. The karma is like that. We have created and wound up a lot of energy patterns in our own self, in our own soul, in our consciousness, and all of that has to ultimately express in this world. And how do they express? They express through the three gunas, which we are all a mixture of. We all have all these three gunas. Later on in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm going to talk about what these are. In summary, they are sattva, rajas, and tamas. The uplifting or the elevating quality, that is the first guna. The activating quality, which is outward action in this world. And the third is darkening. Darkening in the sense it's numbing of consciousness. These are the three qualities or the three gunas that Krishna is talking about. And later on in the Gita, he's going to give a much more detailed commentary on what these gunas are and how we work with them. But essentially, he's saying these three gunas exist inside you and they are going to impel you to act. As I was thinking about this aspect of acting and how everything is creation is impelled, I was reminded of a beautiful poem by this great Bengali saint, a devout practitioner of bhakti, and he was a devotee of Kali. Yogananda ji himself was a great fan of this poet. His name was Ram Prasad. And there's this beautiful poem that he addresses to Kali, where he says, the entire universe, you are carrying the karma for it. The karma of this entire universe is being worked out by you. And when I first read those lines, I was wondering, how can God work out karma? How is it that Divine Mother herself, Kali, is carrying on karma? But in essence, what Ram Prasad is talking about and what we are looking at in this universe is just this pattern of energy. When that spirit separates into outward manifestation, immediately there's karma, so to speak. It's not personal in that same way as it is with each of us individuals, but in a sense, that energy pattern has been set out. And now the only way to resolve it is by expressing it, for it to go through a trajectory of expression in the outward realm. And that's what's happening in this universe. And in a sense, Divine Mother Kali is working out her karma through this universe, or rather she's working the karma of this universe, not of each individual souls. We are all a part of her, but she is so much bigger that she is that driver for all of cosmos. So in that sense, creation is constantly moving. Every moment of time is unique and different from the previous moment. We are all in a constant state of flux and motion. So the state that we are seeking, the state of absolute peace and absolute equanimity, it does not come by disengaging from this fundamental flow of how this universe is built. And that's what Krishna is explaining to Arjuna. We are created in this natural flow of energy, and the only way we can reach absolute resolution and absolute peace is by expressing it in this world and by resolving it through activity in this world. And later on, Krishna proceeds to say, this is also one of my favorite verses. I was debating between 6th verse and the 8th verse of chapter 3 today morning, wondering which one I should pick. So I have to mention the verse 6 in chapter 3 as well. Maybe I'll read the literal translation of that verse too. The person who restrains his organs of action, but in whose mind rotate the thought of sense objects, is regarded as a hypocrite. It's quite simple. The reason why Krishna is mentioning it, it's a very intelligent progression of thoughts. I mean, it's even odd for me to use the word intelligent when describing something as the Bhagavad Gita, because it's much more than that. But also, everything that Krishna is talking about and is presenting makes perfect sense even to common sense, because he's talking about this natural flow of energy that we are part of, and he's saying, yes, you have to disengage, you have to detach yourself from this world and things of this world, because we have already seen that this world is one that is always changing and it's merely an illusion. This world is a sensory mirage. But if we were to simply disengage from the organs of action by not acting in this world, but our mind is still dwelling on sense objects, then we are considered a hypocrite, which means we are just deluded. Not that we have wrong intentions, but that does not define spirituality. What Krishna is presenting in that verse, and for a major part of this chapter 3 is this distinction between outward action and outer rituals and outer spirituality and the inner non-attachment, our own inner life, and what it means to our own consciousness. Because that verse, you can apply it on so many different levels. disengaging from action outwardly but dwelling on sense objects. What does that mean? Oftentimes it is tempting or rather easy, and delusion drives us in those directions for us to even define spiritual life outwardly. Whereas the only measure of spirituality is consciousness, and that is defined by inner non-attachment. So it is very easy to wear spirituality as a shirt from the outside, and Krishna is describing to Arjuna that would make you a hypocrite. Because the only way you can grow is by expressing energy and engaging in this world, but do not dwell on the sense objects. Do not let your mind be pulled down by those forces of Maya. You can still act in this world, but you can do so with inner non-attachment. And then we come to this 8th verse of chapter 3, where he says, perform those actions which your duty dictates. I really love Swami Kriyananda's translation of this verse, because the Sanskrit word that this verse uses is simply the word karma. And Swami beautifully translates it as actions which your duty dictates. And oftentimes in many traditional commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, the translators would translate that word or this part of this verse as saying, you have to do the Vedic rites or the duties, religious duties that are assigned to you, which could mean you have to perform your daily prayers or you have to live by the scriptural rules. All of those are really uplifting and take us in the right direction, but I don't think they are the highest interpretation of the principles that Krishna is presenting in this verse. And in his commentary also, Swami beautifully explains it further. What is it that your duty dictates? How do you know what this karma is? And then Swami says, the duty of every man is that which is particularly his own, ordained for him by the karmic bonds he himself has forged, and must untie to release himself from attachment to the ego. And this is the fundamental understanding that we want to hold in our own lives as we navigate life situations. Because the duty that is being dictated by our soul is not merely defined by our birth or defined by the circumstances that we might find ourselves in, or even things that we are drawn to by our own hearts. What they are defined by our karmic attachments, the karmic ties that we have brought into this world, and that we must untie for releasing our own ego and for taking our souls into freedom. So that is being dictated by our own highest reality. Later on in this same chapter, Krishna also described what dharma is. These two words, dharma and karma, these are part of English dictionary now. So it's almost a little dicey, it's tricky because there's so many connotations when words like that get absorbed into popular culture. But Krishna is very, very specific in how he defines these two words in the Bhagavad Gita, and we want to meditate and tune in deeply into the scripture in understanding what it is that we are saying when we talk about karma and dharma. Karma, in fact, I'm reminded of a story a devotee friend of mine shared. He has been walking the path of Kriya Yoga for decades now. And in one of his talks, he was describing a vision that he himself had during his meditation. And he was describing Divine Mother who came to him in a vision, and she was holding this beautiful gift of light in her hands, and she was waiting to give that to him. And as he approached closer, he realized what this ball of light was that she was holding. That was the unique gift that Divine Mother was holding for his own sake. That was all his karma. Divine Mother was holding in her hands his own karma, because what this karma is the key to his liberation, is the pathway, is that unique path that he needs to walk, that each one of us need to walk in order to retrace our steps. Because all of us, through millions of incarnations, have created these specific trajectories of energy. Who knows what all I have been in my past lives. And in each one of those lives, through every single action that I've performed, I've put out in this universe a very specific trajectory of energy. And now, when I wake up, when I'm in this phase of my life, not just in this life, in my own incarnational cycle, where I wake up and realize that what I'm seeking is transcendence, what I'm seeking is liberation, then Divine Mother is waiting to give that path back to me. She's giving that route, giving that key in my own hands so I can see how can I retrace my steps, how can I resolve every single pattern of energy I myself have put forth in this universe. You watch children sometimes growing up. I have children in my own family. I'm sure all of you do, nieces, nephews, or whoever they are. And I would see one child, she's just 2.5 or 3 years old. She can stand in front of a room with 10 people, and she's so comfortable just lecturing. She's literally 2.5 years old. She barely has words. And I would just look at her and I can just clearly see, you've done this before. You have stood on a stage, you have held a mic, and you have spoken to an audience before. I don't know exactly in what capacity, but I can see that you bring in that karma. Karma is essentially all that energy that we bring into this life. Now the tricky question is this. Now how do you know what your soul is dictating? How do you know that right duty that you have to perform in this life, which is the key to your own salvation? Especially taking this one random example that I started with, is the right duty for that person to become a public speaker? As time progresses, we will know more about her aptitudes and interests, and she might just be an actor, or she might actually be a revolutionary, she might be a politician, she might be a motivational speaker. It could go in so many different directions. But what would the right choice be for each person? How would they know this pathway to resolve the energy patterns that they themselves have set into motion? And here's where Swami offers a lot of pearls of wisdom. He says somebody might have a natural inclination, but it doesn't mean that is the pathway in order to resolve the quirks of their own ego consciousness. Because if somebody does have this propensity for public speaking, it is possible that this skill, this karma, this energy is present inside them in order to express and serve the world so that they can resolve or neutralize whatever it is that they have done in the past. Or they might simply use that energy to affirm the imbalances that they bring from their own past lives. For example, you could be a public speaker and you might be serving and awakening a lot of people to spirituality or to God realization, or to just goodness in their own life, even if it is not necessarily centered in deep spirituality. But you could also be someone who's seeking attention. You could be someone who's just enjoying the limelight, and it might just take you farther from your own goal of dissolving that ego consciousness. So it is something for each one of us to meditate on. Here is where this teaching becomes both extremely practical but also subtle. It is something that we have to tune into. We have to have the inner non-attachment, and that's where Krishna is describing in this chapter of Karma Yoga. We want to have that non-attachment in our own hearts to be able to objectively and honestly see every instinct in us. Oftentimes, Swami Kriyananda would say, when somebody asked, what is my dharma? He would say, if something needs to be done, if you're next in the line, that probably is your dharma. That is your karma too. Which is to say that we don't want to obsess about this. We don't want to sit for months or days, or sometimes I would see people, it would be a recurring pattern in their life where they're constantly thinking, what should I be doing? What should I be doing? Should I be a teacher? Should I be, should I find a job in corporate? Should I go do this? Should I go do that? And this becomes this sort of obsessive question that's just driving you in circles without necessarily moving us forward. That kind of obsession does not really move energy. It simply drives us in circles. So we don't want to do that. Sometimes the most obvious lessons in our own lives are right in front of us. That's what karma is. We don't have to go far to the farthest corners of earth trying to find this gift Divine Mother is holding for us. Divine Mother is extremely compassionate. She's not only holding it in her hands, she's always presenting it in front of our eyes. Karma is going to express, whether we like it or not, every step of the way as we move through life. And all those things that we face in our life, maybe it's a difficult work colleague, maybe it's a relationship in your family, maybe it's your child with whom you have to heal your relationship. It doesn't matter. All those things are constantly being presented in front of us. Now, when we do have a choice, we always want to go inside and evaluate. We want to look at our own hearts and see where are the threads of ego consciousness here. Because I love how Swami puts it. Now, where he says, these are bonds that one must untie to release from the attachment of the ego. And that's really what we are working with in Karma Yoga. We are working with all these bonds that we ourselves have created, these attachments that we have created on top of our ego. And our path forward is to untie each one of them. Last week we were talking, or maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were talking about the process of meditation, of disengaging from the senses. And even here in this chapter, as much as Krishna is talking about acting in this world, he still makes a point about not dwelling on sense objects. It's interesting how these themes are recurring. And he's saying that almost, I feel in part for my own sake, that we don't forget the thread which we were building from second chapter. We are acting in this world, but don't mistake, you're not engaging from the senses. You're acting through your limbs. You're serving through your mind, your thoughts, your actions, your words. You're using your life as a channel for service to others. That's what karma yoga is. We are not dwelling on desires. We are not dwelling on sense objects. And all these bonds that we ourselves have created, we can untie them if we could act in that way. If we could act with that inner non-attachment, if we could move through this world and offer all those fruits of actions at the feet of Krishna, then all these patterns of energy are neutralized. And then, as Krishna says, action is superior than inaction. What is it superior to? That inaction that we are talking about is mere philosophy, mere theory, mere understanding of spiritual truths. It's not the same as living them. I don't know if this was Yogananda ji or a different spiritual teacher. It might have been Swami Kriyananda, I think, in one of his talks. He talks about the Guru is giving you a prescription. The way to heal your illness, the way to cure yourself is to actually take that medicine. And oftentimes people would frame that prescription, put it on the wall and imagine that they're making spiritual progress. That's not spiritual progress. Progress comes when we are able to actually consume that medicine and actually make it a part of our life. And this is where this principle of acting in this world becomes the fundamental aspect of our own spiritual life, where we are acting constantly, practicing these teachings, tuning in to Krishna, tuning into God in whatever form He speaks to you, tuning into the Guru, and offering the fruits of all those actions at His feet. So with that, I'll end the commentary for this verse. Next week we'll see again, and I'll pick up another verse from chapter 3. Until then, God bless you all.